She sat on the edge of the river, knees pulled up under her dress, her hands wrapped around her belly like a shield. Esme wasn't far along, but she felt every bit of the weight already. Not just in her body, though the dull ache in her lower back never went away, but in her chest. That heaviness pressed on her heart, on her ribs, made it hard to breathe sometimes. The baby wasn't wanted, not by the man who made her carry it, and not by the brother who now looked at her like she was a stain on his boots. It wasn't always like this. She used to be her brother Jack's world. After Ma and Pa died of fever, they'd clung to each other like two loose fence posts in a storm. He'd been kind once, protective, used to chase off the boys who tried to pull on her braids at school and bring her penny candy when he got paid from working the rail. But that was before he found dice and liquor, before he owed the wrong men too much money and started seeing her not as his little sister, but as a way out. He'd stopped calling her Esme, too. Now it was girl, or worse, burden. That morning had started quiet. Cold wind creeping in through the cracks of their clapboard shack. No fire lit. She'd woken to the sound of boots on wood, and Jack standing over her with a look that made her gut twist. Behind him were two men, one thin and nervous, the other big as a barn and just as mean-looking. She didn't understand at first. Thought maybe Jack owed them, and they'd come to scare him straight. But then he said the words. She's healthy, knows how to cook clean. You won't find another like her this side of the territory. She'd sat up so fast she nearly fell from the cot. What are you talking about? He didn't look at her. Couldn't. The big man handed him a roll of bills. That all. Jack snatched the money like it might disappear. She's yours now. Esme screamed, clawed at the doorframe as they dragged her outside. Jack didn't look back. Just shut the door behind him like she'd never been there at all. They tied her hands and threw her in the back of a wagon. She didn't stop crying until her throat burned raw. The baby kicked for the first time, then just a flutter, but it startled her enough to stop. She put her hand over her belly and whispered, "It's just you and me now, little one." They drove for what felt like days. Across hard plains and thick woods, past dry creeks and burnt-out fields. The men barely spoke, except to grunt or toss her scraps of food. The big one, Will, stared at her like a prize hog at auction. The thin one, Eli, wouldn't meet her eyes. She hated them both. At night, they camped under the open sky. Will tried to touch her once, and she kicked him so hard he nearly broke her jaw. Eli held him back, muttering something about keeping her clean until they got to the buyer. The buyer. Esme didn't know who that was, and every mile that passed made her stomach twist tighter with dread. Then came the rain. A storm rolled in fast and violent, turning the dirt road to soup. The wagon wheels sank, and they cursed and pushed until the axles groaned. That night, thunder cracked above them like God was splitting the world in two. The fire wouldn't catch. Esme sat under a soaked blanket, shivering and praying for a way out. And then, morning, they reached a small ranch tucked between two rocky hills. It was plain, one barn, a wide corral, and a weather-worn house with its porch steps sagging. Cattle dotted the hill beyond, black specks against the gold grass. A man stood in front of the barn, arms crossed. Tall, lean, hat pulled low over his eyes. He looked like he belonged to the land, quiet, unmoved by storms or men. Will called out, "Got your girl." The man didn't answer right away. When he stepped forward, Esme saw the lines on his face, the shadows under his eyes. He looked older than he probably was. Life had carved itself into him like wind through stone. But his eyes, gray and unreadable, landed on her, and something flickered there. Not desire, not pity, something harder to place. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pouch of coins. Tossed it at Will without a word. She wanted to run. Her legs wouldn't move. Will grabbed her by the arm, shoved her forward. "She's yours now." The man, his name, she'd learn later, was Adam Coulter, didn't touch her. Just turned and walked toward the house, expecting her to follow. She didn't know what else to do, so she did. Inside was warmer than outside, but barely. Sparse furniture, A fire just barely breathing in the hearth, the air smelling faintly of coffee and horses. Adam poured her a tin cup of water and set it on the table. Esme stared at it like it might explode. "You hungry?" he asked, voice gravelly but low. She nodded slowly. He didn't wait. Pulled out a pan and some eggs. Cooked them without a word. When he slid the plate to her, she stared at him. "What?" He didn't answer right away. Just leaned back against the counter, arms crossed again. Didn't sit right. What they were doing. Figured better here than where they were talking you. Where was that? Some camp in Dakota territory. Heard they trade girls like pelts. Her stomach turned. She pushed the plate away. Adam didn't press her to eat. Didn't ask questions. He just said, "You can stay. Far as I'm concerned. Work the house if you want. Or not. Up to you." She didn't trust him, but she didn't have anywhere else to go. So she stayed. Days turned to weeks. He never touched her. Barely spoke unless he had to. But every night, he left a blanket folded at her door. Every morning, coffee sat waiting on the table before she came down. When the baby kicked harder, he asked if she needed help. When she cried herself to sleep, thinking no one could hear, he never said a word. But he did fix the creaky stair that made her trip. He started leaving little jars of mint and lavender on the washstand. One morning, she found a wooden cradle in the corner of the spare room, sanded smooth, no nails showing. Just waiting. She still didn't know what to make of him. But something in her, something broken and bruised, started to hope. Just a little, just enough to hurt. Esme didn't talk about her life before the sale, not at first. But the memories clung to her skin like smoke. Even when she stood at the stove in Adam's kitchen, stirring oats or scrubbing the tin plates, pieces of the past came back in flashes. Her mother's soft voice humming through the night. Her father's calloused hands holding her steady on her first horse. And then the silence that came after they died. The silence that never really left. Jack had been 19 when he became the man of the house. Esme was 12. They were two kids trying to survive in a town too rough for softness. Jack tried to do right at first. He worked long hours hauling freight for the trading post, came home tired but still sat with her at supper, still asked about her day. But he changed after the winter of 1882 when the freight company cut his hours and whiskey filled the hole that pride left behind. He started gambling, then losing, then blaming Esme for every corner he backed himself into. She remembered the first time he hit her. He cried afterward, begged her to forgive him, promised it would never happen again. And for a while it didn't. But the second time came easier. And the third time, he didn't cry at all. In Adam's house, those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. The days here moved slow and quiet. Mornings were filled with the clatter of hooves, the low grunts of cattle, the distant hammering of repairs around the barn. Adam was always working, always outside. He rose before the sun and came back smelling like sweat and cedar. He didn't hover, didn't push, but he saw everything. When she dropped a bucket, overwhelmed by a wave of nausea, he was there to steady her. When she stayed up too late cleaning, he gently took the rag from her hand and said, "Tomorrow's another day." He had his own ghosts. She could tell. He never spoke of a wife, but her absence was in every corner of the house. The untouched piano in the front room, the faded quilt draped over the rocking chair, the portrait above the mantel, a young woman with dark hair and a sad, half smile. Esme caught him looking at it once, his jaw tight, eyes distant. She finally asked over supper one night, her voice barely above a whisper, "Was that your wife?" Adam didn't look up from his plate. Was. What happened? He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. Fever. 3 winters ago. Took her. Took my boy too. Esme's breath caught. She hadn't known about a child. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. He only nodded, the pain too deep to touch. The ranch wasn't entirely quiet. About a week after Esme arrived, a wagon pulled up the dusty path, and out climbed a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair and a scar down the side of his cheek. Sheriff Calder. He and Adam greeted each other like men who'd once bled together, not just shaken hands. The sheriff eyed Esme as she stood on the porch, one hand on her belly, the other wrapped nervously in her skirt. "She the one?" he asked, low and guarded. Adam nodded once. Sheriff Calder turned to her, eyes sharp but not unkind. "You safe here?" Esme hesitated, unsure if this was a test. But she saw something in his face that told her the truth mattered. She nodded. "Yes." The sheriff tipped his hat. "If that changes, you let me know." After he left, Adam explained. "Calder and I served together once, back when the world was smaller. He's good people." The only other visitor was Ruth, the neighbor from down the hill. A widow like Adam, but with 4 children and a tongue sharp enough to cut wood. She showed up one afternoon with a basket full of beans and a raised eyebrow. "So this is the girl," she said, setting the basket on the counter and examining Esme like she might sprout horns. Esme shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "She's pregnant," Ruth added bluntly. "That you're doing?" Adam stiffened. "No," Ruth softened just a little. "Good. Would have smacked you with my broom if it was." She turned to Esme, her tone less harsh. "You staying?" "I don't know," Esme whispered. "Well, eat something. You look like a breeze might knock you down." Despite her bark, Ruth brought fresh milk every week and clothes that no longer fit her eldest daughter. She never asked Esme questions, never pushed. But once, as they sat peeling apples for pie, Ruth muttered, "Men like your brother, they come to bad ends. World don't tolerate cowards forever." Esme didn't respond, but something inside her nodded a little. As the baby grew, so did Esme's strength. Her cheeks filled out again, her hands grew steadier. She started sweeping the porch in the mornings, humming a song her mother used to sing. She learned how to grind corn, how to hang sheets on a line so the wind wouldn't tear them, how to saddle a horse without flinching. Adam taught her how to shoot, too, quietly, without ceremony. Just handed her a rifle one morning and said, "In case you ever need it." She hoped she never would, but she learned. Still, the fear never left entirely. One night, she woke up gasping, heart racing. She could have sworn she heard Jack's voice outside the window. When she looked, there was only wind in the trees. The past wasn't finished with her yet. She felt it, in the cold spots on her back, in the letters Adam never opened that came addressed in handwriting too neat to be honest, in the unease that tightened her chest whenever she saw strange riders out on the trail. And then one afternoon, it came. She was outside, tending to the garden Adam had let her plant near the fence line when she saw the wagon. Not a sheriff's rig, not Ruth's. 2 horses, a man driving, another sitting beside him. She froze, breath lodged in her throat. Adam stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, not raised yet. The wagon slowed, and the man sitting beside the driver stood up. Jack. His hair was longer, face thinner, but it was him. The smirk hadn't changed. Esme backed up one step, too. She felt the baby kick in alarm. "Esme," he shouted, like it was a normal day, like he hadn't sold her like livestock. Adam moved in front of her without a word. Jack's smirk faltered. "I can't take her back." Esme's voice cracked when she said, "You sold me." He shrugged. "Made a mistake." Adam spoke then, calm but deadly. "She's not going anywhere." The second man reached for something under his coat, and Adam raised the rifle. Esme's scream stopped it all. "Don't." But the look on Adam's face said he wasn't bluffing. Jack narrowed his eyes. "She's blood." Adam said nothing. The standoff lasted only seconds, but changed everything. Because Esme realized then, this was her line, her moment. She stepped around Adam, shaking but clear. "You're not my family anymore." Jack laughed. "Don't be stupid." She took another step. "You lost the right to call me sister the day you took that money." He stared at her, and for a second, just a second, she saw it, guilt, or maybe fear. Then he turned and climbed back into the wagon. "This ain't over," he muttered, before the wheels turned and dust rose behind him. Esme stood shaking, heart pounding, breath coming in shallow gasps. Adam reached for her elbow, steadying her. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just looked up at him and whispered, "He'll come back." Adam nodded slowly. Let him try. Esme felt the weight of that day long after the wagon disappeared over the ridge. Even as Adam went back to the barn and the light of morning folded into dusk, her mind stayed fixed on the look in Jack's eyes. Not rage, something colder. Calculating. She knew him well enough to understand he'd be back and not alone. But something in her had changed when she stood in front of him. For the first time, she hadn't been a victim. She hadn't cowered or begged. She had chosen herself. And maybe that choice didn't feel like freedom just yet, but it was a beginning. The days that followed moved with strange peace. Adam didn't speak about Jack unless Esme brought him up, and she was grateful for that. Instead, they found other things to talk about. Small things, the kind that slipped into conversation without meaning to. The weather. The way the hawks circled above the hills. How the baby seemed to kick the hardest whenever Adam started hammering boards outside. "I think it likes your voice," she joked one morning as they sat on the porch, her knitting a lopsided baby bonnet while he mended the sole of his boot. Adam raised an eyebrow. "My voice?" "Yeah. Every time you mutter, it starts flopping around like a fish." He chuckled, low and rough, but it was the first time she'd heard him laugh without holding back. It became a habit, sitting together on that porch. She'd bring out her sewing or a jar of lemonade. He'd sit beside her in the evenings, watching the sky bleed into orange and purple, the sun ducking behind the hills like a shy child. It was quiet, but not empty, not like before. Ruth came by more often, bringing jars of pickled carrots and spiced apple butter. Her youngest, Josie, had taken a shine to Esme and followed her around the house like a duckling. Esme didn't mind. She'd grown used to the silence. But the little girl's endless questions and sticky hands were a kind of balm she didn't know she needed. "Is the baby coming soon?" Josie asked one afternoon, pressing a hand to Esme's stomach like she might feel an answer. "Not for a while yet," Esme smiled. "You gonna keep it?" Esme paused. No one had asked her that before. Not like that. Not honestly. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I am." And for the first time, it didn't feel like something heavy. It felt like something possible. As spring crept in, Esme began to take on more around the ranch. Not because Adam asked, he never would, but because she needed to feel useful. She collected eggs, mended broken harnesses, even learned to tend the horses. Adam taught her slowly, without judgment. If her hands trembled or her balance faltered, he steadied her, then stepped back again. Always respectful, always quiet. One afternoon, she caught him sanding down another cradle board, smaller this time, with smooth edges and tiny carved stars along the sides. "You already made one," she said softly. Adam didn't look up. "That one's for the spare room. And this one," he hesitated. "This one's for you, for your baby." She crossed the room slowly, fingers brushing over the carved wood. "Thank you." He glanced at her, eyes flicking over her face like he was trying to memorize it. "You're welcome." That night, she couldn't sleep. The baby was restless, kicking at her ribs like it was dancing in the dark. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and stepped outside. The stars were so bright, they didn't feel real. The wind was warm, soft against her face. She sat on the porch steps and let the night hold her. She didn't hear Adam until he sat beside her. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head. "Too many thoughts." He nodded like he understood. "It gets quiet at night. Loud in the head, though." They sat for a long time without talking. Then she turned to him. "Do you ever think about starting over?" He looked at her, that same unreadable look he wore when he was trying to hide something honest. "Sometimes. I do too." She didn't say what she meant by that. Didn't have to. A few days later, a letter came. Adam didn't open it first, just stared at it sitting on the table like it might bite him. Esme picked it up and turned it over. No return address. Just his name in sharp black ink. "Who sends them?" she asked. He sighed. "Her father. My wife's. He never approved of me. Thinks I ran her into the ground. Wants to buy the land. Told me I should have buried myself with her." Esme stared at him. "Are you going to sell?" Adam looked away. No, why not? He met her eyes. Because for the first time in 3 years, the house doesn't feel empty. Her breath caught. He stood, heading for the door, but stopped in the frame. You're part of that, Esme. Later that week, a spring storm rolled in. Thunder low and steady, rain soft at first, then hammering down in sheets. The roof held, but just barely. Esme sat in the parlor by the fire, hands resting on her belly, listening to the wind scrape against the windows. She thought of Jack, of how he'd leave her outside during storms like this, just to make her cry. And now, here she was in a warm room, with a man who checked the windows 3 times just to make sure she was safe. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the barn roof had taken a beating. Adam spent most of the day repairing it, and by evening, he came in soaked with sweat and dirt. Esme handed him a cloth and a cup of water. You need to stop acting like you're still 20. He smirked. If I were still 20, I'd be out at the saloon making dumb decisions. She tilted her head. Like what? Like falling for someone I shouldn't. Esme froze. He didn't take it back. Instead, he stepped closer. But I'm not 20 anymore. Neither spoke for a moment. Then she said, quiet as the wind, maybe it's not dumb. And with that, the space between them shifted. Not fast, not dramatic, but like two pieces of something broken finding their fit again. They didn't kiss that night, but his hand brushed hers when he passed her the cup, and she didn't pull away. Time moved forward like a train rolling down track, steady, inevitable. Esme began keeping a list of names for the baby. She liked the name Clara for a girl, Samuel for a boy. Adam didn't argue either one. He started keeping fresh milk by her bedside, just in case she woke up thirsty. She started making him biscuits in the mornings, even though they'd turn out flat half the time. He ate them anyway. They became something quiet and real. Not lovers, not yet, but something truer. A slow-growing trust that didn't need a label. Still, the shadow of Jack lingered. Adam checked the rifles weekly. Sheriff Calder came by twice just to ask if they'd seen anyone riding past. Ruth stayed longer each visit, her oldest boy watching the road like a hawk. But for a time, peace held. And in that peace, Esme found something she'd never known before. Not just safety, not just a home. She found hope. Hope that maybe love didn't always come with pain. That maybe a man could be strong without cruelty. That maybe a man could be strong without cruelty. That maybe, despite everything, a girl sold for a handful of bills could still choose the life she wanted. That maybe, just maybe, she already had. The peace they had built was real, but fragile. Esme could feel it in the way her body tensed every time hooves sounded on the road, in the quiet looks Adam gave her when he thought she wasn't watching. Something unspoken hung between them, like a storm far off on the horizon. Even as spring greened the hills and wildflowers pushed through the soil, the worry kept growing in her chest. Not just fear of Jack, fear of what she was becoming here, what she might lose if she let herself want too much. It started with a letter. Not for Adam this time, for her. Left folded under the porch rail, the handwriting tight and familiar. She found it at dawn, just as she stepped out to shake the blankets. There was no name, but she didn't need one. You think he's going to keep you? You think that baby's going to save you? You'll come back. You always do. You're nothing without me. Esme stared at the words, heart hammering so loud it drowned the morning bird song. She wanted to burn it, bury it, but she couldn't. She hid it in her apron and said nothing. That day, everything felt wrong. The wind blew colder. Her balance fell off. The baby didn't kick as much. She tried to brush it off as a bad night's sleep, but the feeling stuck. Adam noticed. He always did. You look pale, he said that night, as she tried to scrub the already clean kitchen table. Did something happen? She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, I'm fine. He stepped closer, eyes gentle. Esme. She looked away. Sometimes I forget I don't belong to him anymore. You don't. She nodded, but tears filled her eyes. Then why does it still feel like I do? Adam didn't answer right away. He just reached out and pulled her hand into his. Because you were hurt. And hurt doesn't go away when someone tells you it should. The honesty of it broke something open in her. She sat down hard in the chair, covering her face with both hands. I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to raise this baby always looking over my shoulder. Then don't, he said softly. Not alone. The next day, Esme told Ruth about the letter. She didn't want to, but the weight of it was too much to carry in silence. Ruth's eyes turned to steel when she heard. You tell Adam? She asked. Esme shook her head. Well, you better. Or I will. Esme waited until after supper. The dishes were done, the fire was low, and Adam was rubbing oil into the leather of his saddle straps. She sat across from him and pulled the letter from her apron pocket. I got this yesterday. His eyes scanned the page. Then he stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. Where? He asked. Porch rail. I didn't see who left it. His jaw clenched, knuckles white around the paper. He's watching the house. I don't know that. He is, Adam said firmly. And I let my guard down. That's on me. Esme's voice cracked. It's not your fault. But Adam didn't hear her. Not really. He went out to the porch and stood there for nearly an hour, rifle slung over his shoulder, staring into the dark trees. Esme watched from the window, hand resting on her belly, wondering what it cost a man like him to live with a new kind of fear, one he couldn't fight off with his fists or a well-aimed shot, one that came for the people he led into his heart. He slept by the door that night, said it was just in case. Esme didn't argue, but the tension didn't go away. Over the next week, little things began to unravel. A chicken went missing from the coop. Fence wires were clipped. Once they found hoof prints too close to the barn, not from Adam's horses. Sheriff Calder rode out twice, looked around, muttered, cowards getting bold, and left behind 2 more rounds of ammunition. But it wasn't just the outside threat that gnawed at Esme. Inside, her body was changing faster than she could keep up with. The baby shifted lower, putting pressure on her hips and back. Her ankles swelled. Sleep was a stranger. And with each day, the thoughts circled louder. What if something goes wrong? What if Adam changes his mind? What if she wasn't strong enough to be someone's mother? She began to pull away without meaning to. Fewer walks, less laughter. She busied herself with chores she had no energy for, anything to stay out of her head. But Adam noticed. One night, he reached for her hand and she flinched. Not because of him, never because of him, but her body tensed before she could stop it. He pulled back, slowly, hurt flickering across his face. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I didn't mean. It's all right, he replied, standing up. You don't owe me anything. That hurt more than the letter ever could, because it was true, and yet he had given her everything without asking for a thing in return. She didn't sleep that night. Her thoughts were too loud. By morning, her hands were shaking and her stomach was tight with cramps. She tried to pass it off as nerves, but when Adam found her doubled over near the chicken pen, he didn't ask questions. He carried her inside, sat her down on the bed, and ran for Ruth. The next few hours were a blur. Ruth boiling water, muttering under her breath. Adam pacing. Esme trying not to scream every time the cramps came back. It's too early, she kept saying. It's too early. Ruth pressed a damp cloth to her forehead. Sometimes babies come early and turn out just fine. And sometimes they don't, Esme whispered. That was her fear laid bare. Not just losing the baby, but failing it. By sunset, the pain eased. The bleeding stopped. Ruth declared it a false start. But it's coming soon, she warned. You need a rest. No more running around. No more pushing yourself. Esme nodded, but the fear didn't leave. In fact, it only deepened. That night, Adam sat by her bed, not touching her, just watching the rise and fall of her chest. Why are you here? She asked. He frowned. Because I care about you. No, I mean, she swallowed hard. Why me? I'm broken. I come with trouble. You could have turned me away the first night. Adam stared at her like she had grown a second head. Because when I looked at you, I saw someone who hadn't given up. I saw someone worth saving. I don't want to be saved, she whispered. I want to be enough. You are. The silence after that was thick, but not cold. I've been scared to want anything, she admitted, because everything I've ever wanted got taken away. Adam nodded slowly. Me too. And that was the truth between them. Two people who'd lost more than they dared speak of, standing on the edge of something that could break them all over again. But neither moved away. The next morning, Esme didn't flinch when Adam touched her hand. She didn't pretend to be fine, and when she cried, she let him see. That day, they sat together under the cottonwood tree near the fence line, where the breeze smelled like damp earth and sweetgrass. She leaned against his shoulder and whispered, I'm scared. He rested his chin on her hair. So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. For now. It happened just after the first warm rain of June, the kind that made the dirt roads slick and the air thick with the smell of sage and pine. The air had turned oddly quiet, like the land was holding its breath. Esme had started feeling the difference in her body. Heavier, slower, the baby sitting low and still. Ruth said it wouldn't be long now. Esme had been trying to prepare, but she wasn't ready. Not for the labor, not for what came after, and especially not for the man who showed up on their land without warning. She saw him first through the window, just a figure at the edge of the tree line, standing too still to be anyone passing through. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't need to see his face to know. Jack. He wore a clean shirt and had trimmed his beard, but it didn't change the hate behind his eyes. The same hate that had carved itself into her skin over years. The same hate that sold her, body and soul, for less than a mule. Adam came in from the barn, wiping his hands. She grabbed his arm before he saw. He's here. Adam froze. Then he walked to the window, looked out once, and turned away. Go upstairs, he said. Stay behind the curtain. Esme didn't move. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. He stepped outside, shotgun in hand, not raised, not yet. Esme moved to the stairs, but instead of going up, she stayed hidden in the shadow of the open doorway, watching. Jack didn't flinch at the sight of the gun. He raised one hand, mock gentle. No need for that, Dobbs. I came to collect what's mine. She's not yours. Jack smirked. She's carrying my blood. Adam stepped forward. That child's not yours either. Not in any way that counts. Esme felt her breath catch. The wind picked up, whispering through the trees. Jack's smile dropped. You're really gonna raise another man's bastard? He asked, venom in his voice. You think that baby's gonna turn you into a real family? She's trash. She was trash before. She's trash now. I just did what I had to do. Something in Esme snapped then. She stepped out of the house before she even realized what she was doing. Her feet felt like stone, her breath thin and sharp. But her voice was clear. You sold me like cattle, she said, and I survived. You don't get to take that away. Jack turned to her, surprised. I gave you a roof. Food. I kept you safe. You kept me quiet. Adam moved to block her, but she stepped around him. I beg you to stop. And you laughed. Jack's eyes darted between them. You think this man is better? You think he won't get tired of you too? What happens when he finds out what you've done? I've already told him, she said. And she had. Every dark truth. Every shame. And he hadn't flinched. Jack's mouth twisted. You always were good at getting pity. Esme took a breath, steadying herself. This isn't pity. This is love. The kind you'll never understand. That's when Jack pulled the gun. Not fast, but fast enough. Adam reacted first, stepping in front of her. Jack shouted something. She didn't even hear it over the rush in her ears. The shot cracked through the air, echoing through the hills like thunder. Esme screamed, but Adam didn't fall. He had fired too, clean, practiced, and Jack dropped where he stood, shot through the shoulder. Blood soaked the ground. Esme collapsed to her knees. Not from fear, from the pain ripping through her back, around her belly, deep and rhythmic. The contractions had started. Ruth came running from the road where she'd just arrived with her wagon. She didn't ask questions, just grabbed Adam by the collar and shouted, Get her inside. Now, everything after that blurred. Water boiling, cloths torn, Adam's hand holding hers so tight her fingers went numb. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Esme lost time in the pain. She screamed. She wept. She begged for it to stop. And through it all, Adam stayed by her side, whispering her name like it was the only thing keeping her in the world. When the baby finally came, Esme thought the silence would kill her. But then it cried, a thin, high wail that broke through the night like dawn. "It's a girl," Ruth said, placing the tiny, slick bundle on Esme's chest. Esme sobbed. She looked at the child, dark hair, red face, fists balled like she was ready to fight the whole world. Esme had never seen anything more perfect. Adam sat beside her, eyes wet. "You did it," he whispered. Esme shook her head. She did it. They named her Clara. The next morning, Sheriff Calder came for Jack. He'd survive, but barely. He'd be sent back east in chains, the sheriff promised. No deals. No silence. "Should have strung him up," Calder muttered as he rode out. Esme didn't argue, but she didn't wish him dead. Not anymore. She didn't need to. He had no power over her now. She had faced him. She had survived. Again, the house felt different after that. Quieter, yes, but full. Like something broken had finally been mended. Clara slept soundly in the cradle Adam built, her tiny breath steady as the ticking clock. Esme would sit beside her, watching, humming little tunes she didn't even realize she knew. Adam fixed the window Jack had shattered. Then, one evening, he brought something small wrapped in linen. "What's this?" she asked. "A ring." Esme blinked, stunned. "Adam, I'm not asking for anything right now. I just want you to have it. Something that's yours, no one else's." She opened the cloth. The ring was simple. Silver, slightly bent, but real. Esme slid it on her finger. "It fits." He smiled. "So do you. Here, with me." Later that night, as they lay in the quiet of the house, the fire crackling low, Esme whispered, "You were right, you know." "About what?" "I'm not alone." He turned to face her, eyes warm. "You never were." And just like that, all the pieces came together. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough to begin again. The days that followed felt like a dream. Not the kind filled with bright joy and ease, but one wrapped in hush and healing. The worst had come and passed. Jack was gone, behind bars and far from their land. The bruises on Esme's heart didn't vanish, but they eased, softened by the quiet presence of the man beside her and the small, warm weight of Clara in her arms. The house settled into new rhythm. Clara's cries at dawn, the kettle always on, the porch rocking slowly in the evenings. Ruth came by every few days, checking on the baby and Esme's healing, but she no longer lingered as if waiting for something to break. She smiled more, even teased Adam once about learning to hold a diaper without flinching. Esme watched him change Clara once, awkward but careful, his big hands trembling slightly as he swaddled the squirming bundle. "You're not half bad at this," Esme said from the bed, grinning. "I've fixed roofs with fewer instructions," Adam muttered, but there was a flush in his cheeks. Esme knew then she wasn't doing this alone, and neither was he. Some days, she found herself standing outside in the morning light, breathing in the sharp scent of pine and wet dirt, remembering all the times she thought she'd never see another sunrise. Clara's soft sighs from the cradle, Adam's footsteps on the porch. It was a simple life, but it was real. The letter she'd hidden under the floorboard was still there. She thought about burning it more than once. But one night, instead, she gave it to Adam. "I kept this, not because I needed it," she said, "but because I wasn't ready to believe I was safe." He read it again, then, without a word, walked outside and tossed it into the fire. Esme stood beside him, watching the words curl into ash. That night, she came to his room. There was no speech, no long explanation. Just the way she slipped through the door, barefoot, holding the candle in one hand and the weight of all she'd survived in the other. Adam stood when he saw her, unsure, not moving forward, but not pulling back either. I don't want to wait, she said quietly. Not for the past to fade, not for everything to feel perfect. He stepped toward her then. You sure? She nodded. I'm tired of waiting for happiness to feel earned. He kissed her, soft and slow, as if afraid she'd vanish. But she didn't. She stayed. That night, their bodies spoke what their mouths couldn't. Not just desire, but comfort. Not just touch, but trust. The old wounds didn't vanish, but they softened. He held her like something precious. She let him. In the early hours, Clara's cry stirred them both. Adam stood first. I'll get her, he said, pulling on his shirt. Esme lay in bed, the sheets still warm, her chest aching, but not from pain. From something like peace. Spring passed into summer. The fields bloomed wild with purple asters and tall grasses. The chickens nested again. A colt was born in the pasture, and Adam said he'd name it after Clara if it turned out sweet-tempered enough. Esme laughed more. She still had days when silence hung heavy, when fear tapped at her ribs. But she didn't hide it anymore. When she felt it coming, she'd take Clara out to the tree line and sit in the grass. She'd talk to her baby about storms and sunshine, about how love doesn't always come easy, but how worth it is when it stays. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Adam beside her and Clara asleep in her arms, Esme turned to him. I used to think healing meant forgetting, pushing it down, pretending it didn't happen. And now I think healing's just walking through it and finding someone who'll walk with you. Adam reached over, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. I'll walk with you. It wasn't a proposal. It didn't need to be. The ring still sat on her hand, worn and true. And the life they were building didn't need paper or vows to prove it. They were a family. Not the kind she'd once dreamed of in her girlhood before the hurt, but the kind forged by fire and forged to last. Esme looked out over the land, the trees catching golden light, the wind curling through tall grass. This place had seen her broken, and now it was where she was becoming whole. She kissed the top of Clara's head and leaned against Adam's shoulder. I never thought I'd feel this again, she whispered. What? Safe. He rested his hand over hers. You are. And as the sun dipped low, casting everything in quiet gold, Esme closed her eyes and let herself believe it. Not just for the moment, but for all the days ahead.